What's up, YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today as always. So it occurred to me, this is the inaugural If I Could Only Have One for 2018. Gosh, it's been entirely too long since I've done one, and I really enjoy them. I think you guys do too. So I thought it'd be appropriate to start with the Sig Sauer P365. I've had a ton of fun with it, and a lot of people have been wanting some comparisons of various sorts with some of the very popular single stack firearms. I'm saying single stack for a reason. Of course, we'll get to in just a moment. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start with one of the more popular single stacks on the market, of course, the Glock 43, because a lot of you guys have been asking for it, let's face it. And as a reminder with the If I Could Only Have Ones, of course, we take a look at two guns, whether very similar or in some cases very different, and compare and contrast them. We look at specs and features, we do some shooting along the way, we'll take a look at the triggers, and at the end, I will announce a winner, but here's the thing. Both of these guns are fantastic. If you own either one, you're looking at either one, or you own both of them, you're doing great. It's just an opportunity for me to take a step back and challenge myself and perhaps challenge you to say, if I could only have one or if you could only have one, which one would it be? So again, there will be a winner at the end. Well, that brings us to today. Let's go ahead and knock out some specs of these guys. And I don't always do all the specs, but in this case, I think it's really important to get a good idea of where these guys stack up with each other. So from a length standpoint, the 43 is 6.26 inches versus the P365 at 5.8 inches. The height is 4.25 inches versus 4.3 inches. The barrel length is 3.39 inches versus 3.1 inches. The width is, and I will give you a good look at that, of course, it's 1.02 inches on the Glock 43 versus 1 inch on the P365. Now, from a magazine standpoint, and here's where things start to really differ a little bit, the Glock 43 comes with two polymer magazines with steel inserts, of course, very durable, very reliable magazines, as Glock magazines typically are, but they are 6-round magazines. Now, I know you can get extensions of various sorts, +1, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing, which is great. But with the P365, one of the most outstanding features of this firearm is it's really not a single stack, and that's why I kind of hesitated in the beginning. It's one of the biggest differences and why some people might call into question why we're comparing these two, but more on that in a little while. Again, a double stack 10-round magazine. It comes with two, one of which has a finger extension on it. I don't have it up here with me right now, but quite remarkable that such a small firearm is packing 10 rounds out of the box versus having to get extensions and that sort of thing and spend a little bit more money on that. So pretty cool there for sure. Now, of course, both of these firearms are striker-fired firearms. Both of them are polymer frame with steel slides to one degree or another, various finishes on them, of course. But otherwise, from a functionality standpoint, they remain largely the same with a couple of little differences. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of the 43. Again, not really a deep dive here, but in terms of the grip, and I'll give you a good look at this grip is basically a Gen 4 style grip, although I would say it is certainly more mild than some of the other Gen 4s out there. Hopefully you can see that okay. So a Glock 43, in my opinion, might need some grip tape to one degree or another, maybe some sandpaper pistol grips or something like that. Be sure to check out his products, and I've got some videos on him as well. And so I feel like, you know, if you're really sweaty or bloody or anything like that, there might be a little bit more of a chance for this gun to try and get out of your hands, but it will still serve, of course. From a magazine release standpoint, it is a Gen 4 magazine. There's quite a bit of real estate there. I really like the Gen 4 style magazines. They're very positive, they work well, they're easy to get to, and they are reversible, though not ambidextrous out of the box. So not a big deal, but again, a little bit of flexibility if that's something that's meaningful to you. From an overall grip ergonomic standpoint, I mean, you know, any sort of recesses or undercuts under the trigger or anything like that, the Glock stands pretty bare bones. We all know that, and most Glocks are that way. So people tend to modify them and do some undercutting with a Dremel, that sort of thing. And the 43, I think, would be no different. Now, it does have a slide lock, slide release on it. It does work very well as both, of course, but otherwise it's pretty minimalistic. There's no thumb safety or anything like that. And then from a takedown standpoint, there's no lever or anything. It's just the standard Glock takedown tabs. I don't generally take down the guns in these types of videos, but there are plenty out there. So if you want to know how to take down a Glock, be sure to check those out. And then from a cleaning and maintenance standpoint, it's exceptionally easy. I mean, it's very, very easy to get to everything. And one of the really nice things about Glocks, you can take them all the way down, every single part, and you can really get in and clean and switch out parts. Glock has a phenomenal aftermarket supply, I guess, out there, and it's one of the great features of Glocks in general. You can really dial them into your liking. Now, the Sig Sauer P365 is a little bit different, and I would say it's a little bit more feature-rich. Now, from a grip standpoint, I would say that this carries forward basically the X Series style grip, although to me, it feels just a little bit more aggressive. It, of course, is all the way around, front, back, and sides, and I think it looks very good, and it also feels fantastic. Now, it's pretty aggressive, although not so aggressive to where it's going to beat up either your hand or any clothes in a concealed carry situation. So, they've done a good job of really dialing in on that grip texture. I've been very impressed so far. And then from an overall grip contour standpoint, a couple of things. They have done the undercut, again, very similar to the X Series style firearms, just to get your fingers and your hand just a little bit higher on the gun for a little bit more control, and a nice recess here on the back of the grip, and then some recesses for your thumbs on the sides as well. So again, from an overall ergonomic standpoint, I think the P365 feels really good in the hand. It really does. It's been overwhelmingly impressive, especially given how small this guy really is. Now, from a magazine release standpoint, standard SIG magazine release, very similar to like a P320, not ambidextrous out of the box. However, you can swap it around, just like some of the other guns out there as well. And then you've got your your slide lock slide release rather here. And again, it works very well as both. You've got just enough of a ledge and a little bit of traction on there to make that work without a problem. And then from a disassembly standpoint, it does have your standard SIG disassembly swinging down lever, so to speak. And you just lock your slide back, swing that down, and your slide comes off. Do not have to pull the trigger on the P365 versus the 43 you do. So if that's something that's important to you, it might be something to consider. Now you'll notice that there is kind of an accessory rail of sorts on the 365. It is proprietary. Now there aren't any accessories that I'm aware of right now, at least as I'm making this video. There might be down the road, but I imagine they're going to be coming out with lights and lasers and chainsaws, grenade launchers, that sort of thing. So you'll be able to put on your accessories that you want. For me, it's not a big deal. I don't put on lights and that sort of thing on such small firearms, but some people do. So it's nice to have that option, but it is proprietary. So SIG's going to probably own that market. Well, you know, good on SIG, I suppose. From a slide standpoint, not a whole lot going on the Glock, although a lot of people say that's very good. It's minimalistic and it just runs, which I certainly agree with. It does have rear serrations on there, and they're a little bit better than the 42, the 380 ACP version that's a little bit smaller. I've always criticized those serrations. So these are better, a little bit more aggressive, but I actually would like to see them be even more aggressive. And of course, you could take that and have them have somebody tailor that down just a little bit, but that adds cost, and then you'd have to refinish it, I would imagine. So, but again, they will serve, not a big deal. The rest of the slide is very plain and not a lot going on. And then from a sight perspective, these are the standard polymer U-notch sights that Glock is very famous for. They definitely work. I mean, they're accurate enough, and they're reasonably easy to acquire in most situations, not at night, however. But I would say that is certainly something that most people change very quickly when they buy a Glock. They get better sights, at least steel sights, but perhaps some night sights or fiber optics, something like that. And I am very much the same way. I've never been a fan of the polymer sights. They may end up breaking, so it's something that a lot of people do swap out pretty much right away. Now for the slide on the SIG, one thing, they do have front and rear serrations on there. I find them to be really actually pretty good. I mean, they're very usable, they're tactile, and it works really well, especially with this very matte finish. So a lot of bite on that slide, once again, considering how small it is. Otherwise, it's pretty minimalistic. There's a P365, but not a whole lot else going on there. And then from a sight perspective, again, this is something that's pretty cool with the P365. Now, early iterations of this came with night sights, but they were not the X-ray night sights that SIG is known for with their Legion and their X-Carry, that sort of thing. Well, they've changed that, so now these are actually shipping from the factory with the X-ray night sight. So we've got a nice high-def front sight right there, colored in green, and then, of course, we've got our tritium vials all the way around and rear serrations as well. So a little bit of an uptick on the sight sights, and that makes it pretty feature rich for sure. So if you've got an older P365 that came out in the very beginning and you don't have these sights, I think you can contact Sig, and I believe they'll actually ship them out for you. So good on Sig for doing that. Now, from a cost perspective, you're going to be able to find a 43 somewhere in the $400 to $500 range, just kind of depending on where you look, versus the P365 is going to be MSRP at $599. People are generally finding them around $5.25 or so, maybe a little bit less than that. So they're a little bit more expensive than the Glock, but again, you get a lot of features and you get those upgraded sights right out of the box. So to me, in my opinion, it's a bit of a wash, since most people, including me, would switch out the sights on the Glock. So that's something to consider there as well. Well, before we move on and take a look at the triggers and announce a winner, let's take a look at a little bit of shooting and see how these guys do. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, both of these guns are a lot of fun to shoot. I would say that neither one of these guns are all-day shooters, and what I mean by that is if you're going to the range and you've got 500 rounds or 1,000 rounds or something and you want to put it through either one of these, after probably 250 or 300 rounds, you might want to switch to something else. And of course, your mileage may vary there, but I find that smaller guns, after a while, they just kind of beat you up a little bit to one degree or another. But that again comes back to the shootability of these. Now, the Glock, and I've had a long relationship with Glock 43s. I got a very early one when they first were released, and I've owned a couple over the years, and I've carried one off and on for a long time. And when it first came out, man, it was the uber gun. It was was really the big deal. People criticized the 42 so much because it wasn't a 9mm. So when they came out with the 43, everybody was very excited and a lot of fun. I've had a lot of success with it over the years. As I've gotten exposed to other firearms like the Shield or the Shield 2.0, the PPS-M2, or even the P365, my opinion on the 43, I admit, has changed just a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, the 43 is still a fantastic gun. If you're interested in looking at a 43, I think you'd be doing just fine. But to me, there are a couple of things. From an ergonomic standpoint, it's just not as ergonomic, I would say, as some other firearms in its class. From the grip texture to the lack of undercut, it doesn't feel quite as good as it once did. And that's, again, it's not a knock on Glock so much. It's really more my observations of it. And it still has been a lot of fun, for sure. Now, the P365... although it's the new gun and you're probably saying, well, it's the new IT gun, you just got it, so you're really excited about it. Okay, yeah, I am for sure. However, just from an objective standpoint, the P365 in my hands feels just a little bit better. It's a little bit more ergonomic. That undercut, the grip texture, everything just feels really good. Now, I said in my initial video that one thing I did have to do with the 365 while shooting was alter my grip just a little bit. And the reason is that slide is really low. So if you get at it with a normal grip, and a lot of people grip guns kind of like this, they ride their thumb a little bit higher up, you might run into some problems. You might run into some feeding issues, that sort of thing. So I use the accessory rail, we'll call it that, as a reference point for my thumb, and it's become quite comfortable. And you'll notice I'm not touching the slide at all. I've had zero malfunctions with the P365. It hadn't been a big deal, and it's because I made that one change, and this has become quite comfortable. So it really sits well in the hand. I mean, I like the way it feels, and it's extremely shootable. So I would say from an ergonomic standpoint and a shootability standpoint, the P365, I think, takes it just a little bit. Again, not an all-day gun, though. So let's go ahead and take a look at the triggers for a moment or two and compare these. Both are 100% bone stock. Nothing has been done, no trickery to the Glock or anything like that. I've often said Glocks have a great advantage because of their aftermarket. There's no doubt about that. But again, this one is just totally bone stock. So we do have a safety lever on our trigger. Now, one thing, and I'll try and get this up here so you can see it. I don't know how well you'll be able to, though, but when you depress that safety lever, it does not go all the way into the face of the trigger. That's a little bit of a bummer. With these smaller guns, I use the pad of my finger. You guys probably know, typically I wrap my finger through because I have pretty long fingers. So I do use my pad, and I'll tell you what, I can feel that safety lever, and after a while, it just gets a little bit annoying. It's not a big deal when you're shooting. It's a small gripe. But a gripe nonetheless, just something that I've noticed. Now, from a trigger pull standpoint, this is measuring around 6.5 pounds, so it's kind of a stout trigger. Now, it does have a little bit of take up there. It's reasonably smooth. I mean, I can feel some resistance there, and part of that, of course, is just that trigger face. But we get to a very defined wall, and then our break, and it's very crisp, it's very audible. It's one thing about Glock triggers that I very much appreciate, even still today. They're predictable, and they're all basically the same, and there's a lot of feedback to the shooter. Now, from a reset standpoint, audible and tactile once again, and then we're back out to the start, and of course I'll do this again. We've got our take up and our wall. There's our break, and then our reset. So again, a lot of feedback back to the shooter, and that may or may not mean anything to you, may or may not be important to you, but I've often said that Glocks are actually pretty good starter pistols, especially a Glock 19 or something like that, because there's so much feedback back to the shooter, even if it's not the most ergonomic firearm, and there's some others that are fantastic out on the market. Glocks are just, they're very predictable, and again, you can take them all down, you can basically make it a bejeweled masterpiece if you want it to be. So that's the trigger on the 43. There we go. Always fun to do from behind a camera, of course. Now, the trigger on the P365 is dramatically different. First, there's no safety lever, there's no hinge or anything like that. It's just the trigger all by itself, and it's very smooth, it's very comfortable, which is really nice. All of the safeties, of course, are internal to the firearm. And we've got our take up here, and yeah, I went silent there for a moment because there is no sound. It's glass. I mean, it really is exceptionally smooth. And then we do get to a defined wall, And then we've got our break. It's not as crisp as the Glock, I will admit, but still very smooth, and it's crisp enough. There's definitely some feedback to the shooter. Once again, not as much as the Glock. And then our reset and back out to the start. And the reset is fantastic on this gun. I really have very little to complain about with that at all. So our take up again, very smooth. We've got our wall, our break. You'll notice that trigger does not go all the way back to the end of the housing. And then we've got our reset and back out to the start. So out of the box from a trigger perspective, and this comes in right around 6 pounds or just barely under, it's fantastic. I've been very impressed with that. I said the same with the Shield 2.0, more on that at a later time. But the trigger really has surprised me quite a bit. Okay, so here's the hard part. It's time to announce a winner. And this is always difficult to do because at the end of the day, I like both of these guns. I've carried the 43 off and on for years. I've had a good relationship with it. I've never had any major issues with the 43 at all. I've never had to send one back. Nothing is broken or anything like that. So there's something to be said for Glock reliability, and take that with a grain of salt. But still, that's pretty cool. And the Glock 43 has been a fantastic gun. It's very carryable. It's even pocketable, although it's on the bigger side for a pocket gun. It is definitely doable. There are a couple of things that I don't really care for. I think the ergonomics are not as good as I once thought they were. The trigger is okay, it's certainly functional, but there are better triggers out of the box in my opinion. And worst of all, to me, it's the sights. The sights are a bit of a bummer, and I know some people run with these sights, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but to me, these U-notch polymer sights, to me, they have to go. That's an immediate change. Even if the trigger doesn't change or anything else, or even grip tape, those sights would have to go. I don't care for them at all. So the Glock definitely has a lot going for it. There are a lot of great things about it. In my opinion, it's not quite the gun it once was, but still certainly very carryable. The P365, and I know it's been kind of the wonder gun over the past few months, I will say some of the hype kind of lives up to expectation. It really has been a tremendous firearm. Now, if you saw my first video, you might be saying to yourself, well, KS, hang on a second. You had a little bit of an issue with the P365, and I absolutely did. Not a functionality issue at all. Everything ran just fine. However, I did discover that there was some peening on the interior front of the slide here. So the parts are kind of slamming together when you shoot the gun. So it's creating little divots in the front of this slide. So much so that actually this is not my firearm. Mine is actually on the way back to Sig Sauer, and this is actually a stand-in. It's a body double. So I appreciate the ability to be able to do that from a buddy of mine. And so I know that's a little bit of a ding on Sig. Now they are making that right, of course, on any firearms that are out there that are having that problem. And I think they're correcting it going forward from what I understand. So at least good on Sig for making that right. But it is a little bit of a bummer, and I do ding the gun for that, for sure. It's too bad that they've had the issue and they put so many out before getting that fix in there. But once again, their customer service is fantastic. I've always had a good experience with Sig, so I trust that they will make it right. It'll come back and it will run, and this will go back to its owner. So you know, take that for what it's worth, of course. But otherwise, from a shootability standpoint, from a feature standpoint, ergonomics, the sights, all of that, it really is a great package. And the fact that it's a 10 round, basically, I know it's not a single stack, it's a double stack, but I would consider this really a micro 9. It's pretty astonishing. It's astonishing how much has gone into this firearm, and I think other manufacturers will probably take note of that, and perhaps we'll see some other offerings from other manufacturers to give this a run for its money. So that's good for all of us, of course. But at the end of the day, if I could only have one, and you probably see this coming, yes, I would take the Sig. And again, mine is on the way back to Sig, so it's a little bit of irony there. But at the end of the day, I think because of all the great things going into the P365, and I think it's got an exciting future, it's the one I would take if I could only have one. So guys, sound off down below. I want to hear what you have to say. If you agree or disagree, I have a feeling there are going to be some people that disagree, and I completely appreciate that. But I'm looking forward to read those comments. Guys, thanks so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.